Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Friday night against the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that nationally has been talked about as somewhat of a disappointing start to the season. Again, only 7 or so games. It's very early, but not off to the best start. And I wish I could say the Knicks were off to a great start and that this was an inverse of two teams going in different directions. But the Knicks coming off of 2 losses to end their 4-game road trip in Houston and obviously on Wednesday in Atlanta. Hopefully the Knicks can return home and return to their winning ways as well and find a little more backline defense. It's just all I'd appreciate. Maybe guard Ricochet, Josh Hart. That would be great if you did that. I digress. It's time to talk about the Knicks matchup on Friday night against the Milwaukee Bucks. And joining me to do so, my good friend from the Blue Wire podcast family, from the Eurostep podcast as well, Mr. Ti Windisch. Ti, how are you, sir? How are things going on the basketball court?
It's like not getting a whole lot brighter. The Bucks are 1-6. Although I did say on the Eurostep podcast to start this week, I feel better about them at 1-6 than I did about them at 1-4. And for your audience who's not watching them closely, lost 2 really close games to the Cavs, like both coming down to probably 1 or 2 possessions at the very end, the final minutes. And Cavs have not lost yet this season, having a tremendous start. So would prefer to not be 1-6, but thankfully the East, you're looking at it this morning, 1-6, you're in 14th. You're 2.5 games out of 3rd because nobody's over 500 except for Boston and Cleveland. So thank you to the Knicks and everyone else who has just been like, yeah, we're gonna muddle around a little bit too.
We are doing our best to make sure that the Bucks have as much time as possible to figure things out. And I guess as a Knicks fan, we could take that solace as well. The rest of the conference is still kind of figuring it out.
It's a mess.
And unless you're the Cavs, which the Knicks also had a game against the Cavs where they were up 15 in the 3rd quarter. And then Jalen Brunson went out with like what we thought was going to be a major injury. And it just turned out he was fine. But during that stretch, they cut it down to like 6. And then the 4th quarter, the Cavs became the Cavs and what they've been so far this season. But we're not here to talk about the teams that haven't lost yet this year. We're here to talk about 2 teams that have lost a bunch so far this year. And I want to start with your team. Because I went into this year very high on the team going in. I tried to be bold with my predictions. You have to do that with your preseason picks. You can't just be boring and be chalk and be like, I'm going to list the over-unders in order.
I think the Celtics are going to win the East. Yeah, wow.
Right, like
the
Celtics against the Thunder is my finals pick. Yeah. No, I had the Knicks as my 1 seed. I had the Bucks as my 2 seed. And that looks extremely stupid right now. I eventually adjusted it and went Knicks 1, Celtics 2, but I had the Bucks as my 3. And so far, not looking like I have a real crystal ball over here. I did like the depth pieces with their mid-levels that they added. I thought that would be just having adults in the room, that while there are obviously some age concerns, I thought just a off season of Dame and Giannis together and, Dr. Rivers, that him actually being able to have a full training camp would be able to improve some things. And then the start to this season happened. So you tell me how bad it is. The state of the Bucks is how we're going to start this. How bad is the 1-6 start? How fixable are the problems on this team? You tell me.
Yeah, I think it's never good when you start 1-6. The team's panic level is incredibly low. Doc had the quote, like, we're going to make the playoffs. We're not worried about that. And a bunch of players have chimed in similarly. Like, I think Bobby Portis was like, Knicks legend, if you have a 1-5 run, like when you already banked 30 some games, nobody really notices. But, to start the year, it just looks crazy. And I think I'm mostly with that. I would say they had 3 losses that I think showed real issues with the team, and that was Brooklyn, Chicago, and Memphis. And I don't just pick those because they're the worst teams of the 3 that they've lost to, but it's especially Brooklyn and Chicago. They just weren't disciplined enough. They were lazy defensively, and I would say offensively. Offensively with shot selection, just a lot of iso ball from Dame and Giannis, but then defensively, guys just missing rotations, not staying attached around screens, things like that. And these young teams just kind of got some momentum and then just didn't look back, like Ricochet against the Knicks, right? Like sometimes you let a guy who, you're not talking about like prime Klay Thompson, but, you get an NBA player in rhythm, they can hurt you. And the Bucks found that out the hard way in those 3 losses, I think. And they're just a little unathletic, but I would say I'm not at red panic level anymore. because Damian Giannis looked phenomenal, and Giannis may not play against the Knicks. So he's questionable with an adductor strain going into their Utah game on Thursday night. It's a back-to-back for them. So I would imagine Giannis plays at most one of those games. We'll see which one he ends up playing. Kind of want to make sure you get the win over Utah, but they, as we're recording, like Markkanen is questionable. So maybe there's a little bit of subterfuge or something going on with those two right now. Regardless, I won't talk anymore about the Jazz game. But Dame and Giannis have played well together more than last season. I mean, they had a game where they had like 70-some points, 20 plus assists and rebounds combined. Like they both were shining in a way that I think it was more of a your turn, my turn, game to game thing last year. So that piece is encouraging. Brooke Lopez still looks great. That piece is encouraging. You never know how your 36-year-old, center of your defense literally is going to look. He's looked really good. Like the additions have been bad. And I think it's in a way that probably isn't sustainable. Gary Trent is like sub 20% from three, either for the season or in his last several games. And the looks are great. Like that just, there's like a Bucks tax on shooters for some reason. I don't know why. They always have to give up a few points, but I think Trent shouldn't be like the worst 3-point shooter in the league by any means. So we'll see about that one. And then I think DeLon Wright's dealt with an injury. Prince has been okay. That he just doesn't shoot much, and he's asked to guard a little smaller than he should most of the time. But I would say those, and then guys like Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton playing below their standard has been a bigger issue than like the actual old players looking old. And they looked a lot better, the Bucks, when they injected some youth into the rotation, especially in that second Cavs game. Guys like AJ Green, Andre Jackson Jr., even a little Ryan Rollins. So now the question is how much of that is going to persist and how much of their old issues does that fix? Because suddenly the semi-transition woes were kind of gone when they just played some of these younger players, and they played well on both ends too. It wasn't like they're just out there to run back. So it's not a great spot, obviously, for the Bucks. That's probably an understatement, but I do think I don't look at it and go, none of this is fixable. I look at this and go, some of these vets, they need to hit the play better button, as Nekias Duncan puts it on the dunker spot. And then Doc needs to continue adjusting the rotation accordingly too.
So this is where I actually have a question about the adjustment they made in the offseason to go to Gary Trent Jr. to let Beasley walk and go to Trent Jr., Prince. I've gotten into this new world of spacing and shooting and having as many good shooters on the floor at the same time, and the world of 5 out in a stretch 5. And I look at the Bucks this year, and if I'm going to operate as if Giannis is playing on Friday, because I don't know if you know this. You know what players love to do? Play at Madison Square Garden. So I'm going to assume,
Giannis especially. It's a special place for him.
So as he's mentioned, and in the past, when all the rumors of Giannis potentially, we'll talk about that later, but like,
oh, good.
When I know you love having this conversation with. If it helps, it has nothing to do with my team anymore. The Knicks have gone all in. I can't ask about whether the Knicks are going to trade for.
Giannis is dying to go to Cabo with Ben Simmons. So
he can't wait to go.
I'm shaking in my boots, man.
He can't wait to go to Brooklyn and play for all dozen of their fans over there. Yes. Yes. Point being, I look at what the Bucks are at the moment, and I'm operating as if Giannis is playing on Friday, and even if he isn't, there's not many shooters out there. And what's killed the Knicks so far with Cat and Drop, and they've been able to deter shots at the rim. Like Dame driving actually could scare me a little bit, but I would hope the point of attack is a little stronger to deter him from getting to the rim. But the kick out is it doesn't scare me as much. So how much does it concern you that you're not able to take advantage of teams playing that type of coverage so far? Whereas last year, and obviously Dame shot better as the season went along, but I mean, that's honestly the thing that would scare me the most. In those first two games against the Bucks last year, like that first in-season tournament game where the Bucks hit 43s, it felt like, and then the early game in the season when Julius Randle was really bad, but Brunson had almost 50, the Bucks just couldn't miss, and Beasley was part of that. Giannis hit a bunch of threes, which is very annoying. That doesn't scare me as much. So I ask you, the downgrade in shooting that has existed so far this season, how much does that concern you so far?
I mean, it concerns you to a certain extent. I will say Prince, who's been the spot starter for Khris Middleton, who I think is probably not going to be playing by Friday, but we really don't know. That he's the mystery man at this point. Prince is 56% from three, so he's been red hot. He's really cashed in.
Attempts a game. It's really a Gary Trent thing. It's a Gary Trent thing. It's Brooke not being that great anymore from three. Yeah.
I think he's streaky. Like I think he had a good shooting game against Memphis where the team just didn't play well. It wouldn't surprise me if Brook came out and had like a 4 for 5 night sometime in the next week. But then, he'll have 3 more 1 for 4s or 1 for 5s. Cause like the thing about Brook, bless his heart, like he knows you can't turn down open shots, but he also knows, I think, that teams want him to be the guy. You'd rather have Brook 2 feet above the line than Dame or Giannis at any point. So that balance, I think, has been difficult for the Bucks. They're trying some things there, but yeah, that's a huge issue. I mean, I said AJ Green should start over Trent this week just to see if maybe you can get Trent going off the bench. I mean, I get all these questions from Bucks fans like, is he taking too many hard looks? I'm like, no. I mean, he's getting spoon-fed shots. This guy was scoring 17 on awful Raptors teams. Like, I think it's just a slump. I don't know what it is, frankly. It feels like just a slump, but I would give AJ Green a shot who, people would talk about his slow start, and he's like 40. He's above 50% now again from 3 because he was 7 for 9 in their last game against the Cavs, and he's been a better perimeter defender. So I think they need to inject more shooting now, but I also think like you should trust variance in that Trent Jr. is going to be knocking down these shots. I mean, they're getting him some really nice looks from 3 that he's just not connected on. So I think he's going to get there eventually. I don't know if like a Bobby Portis is, like his shot just looks so weird, but he was red hot in preseason, but he doesn't take all that many either. I think it's really Trent and needs to knock them down. And then when you get Middleton back, that's obviously going to be a huge lift to your spacing as well. But for the meantime, I think it's more AJ Green minutes because he's been he just crushes, man. He's a great shooter. And then you have to hope Trent can figure it out sooner rather than later.
So I'm going to read some numbers for Knicks fans that aren't aware, and it's going to lead to a place that's not as disparaging, I promise. So Giannis, I believe he's taken 2 threes this year. So
don't think he's made one yet.
Yeah, so he's 0% from 3, but that doesn't matter. Just not a shooter, but we know what Giannis is. One of the greatest players in the league at the moment. Dame is shooting 39% from 3. Then you go, as you mentioned, Taurean Prince at 56.5 and AJ Green at 60. And DeLon Wright, I should say, also at 42.9%. Then we go Bobby Portis at 22, Brook Lopez at 28, Gary Trent Jr. at 23, Pat Connaughton at 30. And I say all of this because I know there are Knicks fans listening to be like, oh, so they're all going to hit like 2 or 3 threes on Friday night. And that's going to be the regression game. That it's going to be the Knicks at the Garden. Yep. That obviously leads to them turning things around. Which, I mean, look, that this is what regression is. And you also bring up an interesting point, and the AJ Green potentially starting suggestion that this is part of a thing in Knicks land right now where their offense, their starting 5 has a very elite offensive rating and a really good net rating so far. It's Brunson, Josh Hart, Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Cat. There was a movement before the season. I may have been part of that movement, not because I thought it would be better, but I thought it would fit the team better, that Deuce McBride should start for Josh Hart. You'd be allowed to go a full 5 out, a true 5 out of 5 shooters. They've not necessarily hidden Josh Hart, but they're using him in a way, like bringing him into the action as a screener, making sure he's moving at all times if he's not in the action. His rebounding, like taking advantage of the space that teams give him so he can be the elite rebounder he is, and he's averaging close to 11 rebounds a game. But the Knicks also don't have a backup wing at the moment. Like Mikal Bridges is his backup wing. Then Josh Hart is his own backup wing. So like you could potentially make it work if you started Deuce and then brought Josh Hart off the bench. I just think it would end at the same minutes distribution. And I think I say this and like it's really more a commentary or maybe not necessarily a question about what fans do. Like we're saying like, oh, it would be better. It'd make more sense or just see something different about like AJ Green or Josh Hart giving a look or Deuce McBride getting a look in the starting 5. And yet there is like a hierarchy thing that in the NBA that is unspoken, but it's also understood. Like Tyler Hero, it probably would have been best for the Heat to keep him coming off the bench, but like, no, I'm a starter. Like I've earned the right to be a starter. It is a demotion, even if it is better for the team. If I'm coming off the bench, Emmanuel Quickley with the Knicks, like said publicly, I want to be a starter one day, even if Tibbs was going to play him the 4th most minutes with the team. Like it didn't matter. Like the status of being a starter matters. And I don't know, it's interesting, like with Doc and that type of decision, like I'm going to trust my veterans because like you have earned the right to be a starter, Gary Trent Jr. And I wonder like your overall thoughts on like, we can say like it probably would make more sense, but the reality is that's a demotion and what that could potentially do to the locker room, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that aspect. I think, Trent hasn't known anything as a Buck. And I think that's, I'm sure there's some, I don't want to use the word promise because people infer this and then think like, he's contractually obligated to start 83 games or something this year. But I'm sure when he signed for a vet minimum, when he could have gotten more, there was at least an implication like, yeah, you're going to be obviously you're going to be the starter. We have 4 guys who are clear starters and you're the 5th and the hole is at 2 guard and you're a 2 guard. They're talking about John Horst on the hot seat though. I think we're past the point of like, oh, we want to do the decent thing and make sure that Gary Trent feels good. We want to make sure we're not 1-7, man. We want to make sure that, we are going to be able to claw out of like the play and be a real playoff team this year. So, and I think with, Hart been like a key figure on these, Knicks playoff runs that changed the course of the franchise. Like, I think it's probably a little harder for Tibbs to go to Hart and have that combo versus Doc to Trent, who, he went and recruited him. They're close, whatever. He has done nothing in a Bucks uniform that matters, right? Like, some good defense on Tyrese Maxey in their first win, their only win. That's about it so far. So I think there's certainly, it's never as easy as we make it seem. And again, like Gary Trent has a several year sample size of being a great offensive player. I'm not like, you're not going to cut him, right? I'm not saying 7 bad games and you're ready to give up on him forever. I just think this team needs a little more juice and he's not really giving you it on either end. So I would try something else, but they can just do it. Like you mentioned with IQ formerly on the Knicks. I mean, Trent got outplayed minutes wise by Green to a vast margin in their most recent Cavs game. Like you can just do that again too. And I don't think it really ultimately matters that much at the end of the day. But it's just something that I think merit wise, just based on this season, AJ Green's just been clearly better, even though we haven't seen him as much.
We interrupt this conversation with Ti Windisch to tell you about some breaking news that dropped after we got done recording. According to Chris Haynes, the senior NBA insider, the Milwaukee Bucks are expected to make a change in their starting lineup by inserting Andre Jackson Jr. in place of Gary Trent Jr., a couple of juniors switching it up for tonight's game against the Utah Jazz. So you might be watching this after that game is done and there's already a starting lineup change in place. Obviously, Ty just mentioned that he was hoping that AJ Green would be the switch for Gary Trent Jr., but Gary Trent Jr. will most likely be coming off the bench in this matchup against the Knicks on Friday. We're on the right track. Just got the wrong name. So shout out to Ty. Hope you're enjoying. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Well, we'll see what happens if, Tibbs has like a 20 game sample that he likes to go to before making any significant changes. It helps that the Knicks are very banged up and might get some players back when we get to 20 games. I say very banged up. Everybody in the starting lineup right now is fine. It's just they have Deuce and then maybe a backup like Cam Payne, who wasn't playing great, is missed the last 2 games. Precious Achiuwa hasn't played yet this season with a hamstring. Mitchell Robinson obviously suffered a Joel Embiid injury during the playoffs and hasn't returned since. So they're playing a rotation of about 6 guys plus 2 guys for 17 minutes. Like the minutes are concerning so far, Ty, but this is the nature of an NBA team that's gone all in and now has to make do with what you have. Which, look, as far as this matchup is concerned, I do want to get your thoughts on what the Knicks did this offseason when they made they made a blockbuster trade in June and then another one in August. In September. And both of them shook up our expectations. At first, it was like, oh, the power of friendship has been doubled down. Take that, Nets. And then they went all in for Cat. So if you want to go in order, like, what was your reaction to the Mikal trade? Your reaction to the Cat trade, and then where you place the Knicks now as far as the East landscape is concerned?
I liked him better after the Mikal trade, frankly, even though if you look at both like individual value or whatever, you could say the Cat trade was a better trade, I guess, depending on how you feel about the players, of course. But, they obviously gave up so much to get Mikal. But I love the idea of like all the wings that they have. And then you still have your drop bigs. And of course, they didn't trade away those guys. They're just hurt. So that makes it a little tough, I think, to evaluate, just because my concern with Cat all along, really his whole career since like the early Minnesota days, has been like, it's just really hard to defend with a 5 who doesn't defend. And then Minnesota, of course, is like, well, you're a 4 now. He's basically been a 4 the last couple of years, and it worked better, right? Like I think he's better at those things. He kind of reminds me of like a Bobby Portis, who I think you put Bobby Portis like as a switchable defender and he'll do okay. You ask him to do big stuff and it's just bad. And I kind of think same with Cat. Like he kind of learned to be like kind of a big 4 and just like getting guys' ways, and like is good on Jokic one-on-one kind of, but defending at the 5 is just a different thing than it's not one-on-one. That's what people don't understand. Like I see Bucks people all the time go yelling at Brook Lopez, like, oh, Brook, he can't guard the perimeter. What's this? He is guarding a like 10 foot by 10 foot, the most important part of the court every night from all 5 players at once. And the 4 players around him are usually letting him down. And it's just such an intricate, careful thing to defend. And I don't think Cat's very good at it. So I liked them a little better before. Obviously they made the talent play and the like, we just need a center play, which I actually want your thoughts on this. I don't mind if they just said long-term, we think Cat is more talented than Dante and Randall, maybe not combined, but either one of them. And you can only play 5 guys and we have all these other guys. Like, sure, that's okay. If the move was really though, like, oh, we need a center this year, like we're ready to contend and our centers aren't healthy, I don't like it then. Because I don't know if he's a center. Like, right, you play him at the 5. I don't know if he's really a defensive center. And 2, like, that just reeks of desperation. And I don't like, after seeing the Bucks do it with Dame last year, I just didn't like either of those teams. I didn't like it for either team making a trade in September because it's going to take so much time now. Like we just saw this with the Bucks. We saw this, the last time Gobert was traded. Like I just felt like it kind of turned back the clock a little bit on how ready Minnesota and New York were going to be. And now we're seeing it, right? All this talent, but 3 and 4, 3 and 3, whatever the record is. I think they're going to be fine, but I liked them a little better after the first trade, all this to say. And Dante continues to just like, be an incredible player, even better. Every time he gets traded, it just fuels the fire, I guess.
Well, so that's right, former Buck Dante DiVincenzo.
Oh, yeah.
The ironic part about what's going on in Minnesota right now is Julius Randle is exactly the version I thought he'd look like with the Knicks, with a ton of not necessarily spacing around him because they are playing him next to Gobert, but he played most of his minutes with Mitchell Robinson. Yeah. So he's used to playing with a center in the dunker spot. And, Gobert has better hands than Mitchell Robinson. So all these dump off passes that Randall would get to him that Mitch would fumble out of bounds, Gobert's getting and just like, oh, these are easy assists. So Randall's like on his way to averaging 7-8 assists this year. It was a thought of mine. I wasn't crazy about the Cat trade when it was made. I'll say that. I was very bought in on the, power of friendship lineup, the Villanova Voltron that they created. I loved what DiVincenzo brought to this team. Monica McKnight, ESPN superstar, but also part of the Knicks family here on the radio broadcast. She came on our show at the end of last season. And the thing that stood out to me, that what she said as far as a plan for the offseason was like protect the culture at all costs. Like we can talk about acquisitions and trades and whatnot, but you've built a culture here. And doubling down on the Villanova of it all was like, all right, you've now really gone all in on this winning culture that happened in college. And then right before the season started, I don't want to say you gambled the culture away because the culture starts and ends with Jalen Brunson. But like now you've made a talent play and you've raised the ceiling, but you've now lowered the floor a bit as well in this thing for Cat. And I got to say, the biggest thing I'll say from the first 7 games, I've just been thoroughly impressed with what Cat has been offensively. Like I knew he was great and I knew what the numbers said, but how he gets it, like the heat checks, the way he battles on the boards offensively. Like, yes, you could really pick on him in drop coverage. He is a bit of a traffic cone as a last line of defense, but on the boards, like if the other team misses, he is in there fighting, and leads the NBA in total rebound percentage at the moment. I did think about the Bucks though when the Knicks made the trade, when they made it, understanding the timing was like, this is probably your last chance to make this trade. And to the Mitch of it all, like, did they need a center? It ends up being like a 3-for-1 because they lost Mitch and then lost Julius and Dante to get Cat. So I don't think they. I wish it has been reported that they did make this trade because that was the calculation, and like they scoured the landscape of the league and was like, Danny Ainge wants 7 picks for Walker Kessler.
Yeah,
Nobody else wants to trade a center right before training camp, and this cat trade has been available to us for like 2 years. If we want to make it, we just have to throw in Dante, and they decided to throw in Dante, and here we are. So that I think is the. I don't think they made the trade because they needed a center. I think because they needed a center, this made them decide to finally make the trade. Yeah. So now we need a center. You know, we've considered this trade for years, and Julius is extension eligible. We can only make this trade now because of all the maneuvering that they had to. Do you know what they had to do on the side of all the minimums that they had to create?
Well, yeah. Who was the guy who they had to buy out and then send back overseas? That was
Dwayne Washington Jr. was playing overseas. I was a fan
of him as a player too. Yeah, partisan, I think.
Yeah, he's playing overseas, and they bought out his contract so they could sign and trade him on the Knicks to Charlotte, which is why Charlotte became the third team in the deal. And then so the Knicks just needed to have more money going out, and it was 3 players. I forget the other 2, but they signed and traded 3 players out on a minimum plus $1 deal. So it technically wasn't the minimum because you can't stack minimums if you're over the first apron. And the Hornets accepted the trade. He played 1 preseason game against the Knicks, and
that's the funniest part.
The craziest part about the end of that game against the Knicks, down 2 at the end of the game, he gets fouled on a 3, misses all 3 free throws, gets cut, and is now signed by his international team at a lower rate. So that international team saves money at the end of the run. So, yeah.
I love the Hornets piece. Like they just are waving and accepting and cutting and re-signing all these guys, and they're just collecting free second round picks. Like, sure, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Our guys suck anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did think about the Bucks when the Knicks made that trade. That I'm talking to you last year, which was funny. All the frustrations you were saying to me. It's like, well, against the Knicks, you don't miss. You know, they played the team 4 times before Christmas. And then the next time we met up was at the end of the year when the sky was falling a bit under Glenn. And that win at the end of the season for the Knicks sparked a charge to the 2 seed. So I mean, you tell me, like, should Nick, if you want to give a memo to Knicks fans, like, I don't see the Knicks firing Tibbs the way that the Bucks fired Griffin, but like, how much patience should Knicks fans have throughout this adjustment period?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of patience, I think, especially because, as you mentioned, like, they just don't have their full team right now, and that just doesn't give you as many options. I mean, I've heard people say, you know, they're going to start Mitch and Towns when he comes back. I don't know about that personally, because I think the difficulty there is just like, you know, like with this whole conversation we're having, like, oh, you have to get used to playing a new way. And it was always going to change a little. Like, you know, they never had their whole team together last year, and then you add Bridges. But I think, like, you know, it's just like he's a better Dante in some way. I mean, they're different players, but like you got a better wing, right? By the end of the day, now that you made all these swaps, like, I don't think it's that hard to incorporate another wing who can do a bit of everything. Like, that's a little easier. But now it's like, okay, we're going to learn to play more 5 out plus Hart with Cat at center. Like, Cat and Mitch is totally different than that now. Again, so you're like, again, making a pretty big change to how you play. And that's what I think takes the longest to adjust to. It's just like, what does the floor feel like for these guys? It was always going to be a little different, but now it just feels way different. And it's like kind of a fascinating bet they made of just like, you know, maybe we have weak spots at the 1 and the 5, but our 2 through 4s are great. Like, how much can we overcome that? I think they're like a fascinating basketball experiment. But I think you have the benefit of the culture is more in place. You know, losing Dante hurts, but, you know, Jrue was just a more integral part of the team. And you're not trying to bring in like a rookie head coach who clearly ended up being in over his head. Like, Tibbs is the opposite of that. I think that's a huge help. I think you have more in place to start with, but it is still just a drastic change. So it depends how you want to play it. And if they're going to be, you know, even more active, I can't imagine there's many more big moves coming before February. You never know. But like, how drastically do you want to change the floor balance again? Or do you want to tweak the starters when everyone's healthy or not? Like, those questions to me kind of will tell you the answer of how long it'll take. But I mean, I would imagine by the new year, they're going to have a little more balance. I mean, you're going to know what they're not good at, but, you know, I think there's enough talent to overcome those weaknesses. Every team has that.
So as far as another move coming is concerned, they're like very out of picks at the moment.
Yeah.
Like
Hey,
they have.
welcome.
Oh,
They tell you that, and then the team figures it out. I mean,
we went for years. Like, what's Leon Rose gonna do? He's got a treasure chest of assets. You know, all the picks, made this trade with OKC. The Bucks pick that now the Nets fans are teasing us about because that's going to be a lottery pick because of what the Nets start has been. They have now what they have is Mitchell Robinson's contract. I guess technically Precious Achiuwa's contract too, which is about $8-9 million. They have the Wizards first, but it's like lottery protected for the next 2 years, so it's 2 seconds. And then they have a 2029 swap that they didn't, or 20, it's either 29 or 30, whichever didn't go out to the Nets trade that they kept, that I guess you could technically include.
Oh, teams like those.
Well, just like however all in you want to go on whatever you can get at the deadline. It's really
I think you're kind of here, right? That's where the Bucks ended up. You got past a certain point, and it's just like, you know what? Like, if we're not going to win in the next 5 years, like, do we give a damn? No, we don't. Like, it's, you know, not having to swap at 2030, maybe it ends up really being bad, but you know, if you're looking back at a title, who cares? You know, like you'll get over it, man.
The way that things ended 2 years ago, I mean, like, this is maybe an unfair question because it's 1-6, and the obviously how last season went was disappointing. But like, do you look at all, or do we really more so do Bucks fans, like, for what you see from the fan base, like, do they look at all at what the start that Bud's gotten off to in Phoenix, what Jrue has done with the Celtics? Like, is there any, not necessarily buyer's remorse, but like second guessing of like blowing up that team that was a 1 seed, but then like Giannis got hurt and then they lost to the Heat?
Yeah, I think more for Bud at this point. I think the Jrue thing is like, yeah, they've had a lot of team success, but I just think, I mean, you could be a relative simpleton and watch any of the Celtics versus Bucks games and just see like, okay, one guy is flourishing on his new team. He is like the 5th option. I mean, frankly, I'm not even trying to disparage Jrue. People, oh, you're talking. No, he's a Bucks legend.
Relative simpleton is a great term, by the way. I'm going to start using that.
The guy, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to make this open layup and shoot a bunch of open threes, and then Dame has like, you know, 38 points on 20 shots or even less. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's exactly what they needed. It's the perfect kind of player to pair with Giannis that we all knew all along. It's been a huge adjustment, but I think you look at the butt of it all. I don't know if you saw, I got yelled at by Jay Crowder on Twitter. Because,
I didn't know what happened.
I said after the other day that maybe because like the two guys who I remembered like speaking out afterward, like, oh, you know, the culture, things like that, after they made the move to Griffin, were Bobby Portis and Jay Crowder. And like looking back, maybe the Bucks should have just gotten rid of those guys and found some guys to instill a better culture and kept Bud, because, you know, we know Bud's faults, but obviously he builds winners. See Phoenix and Milwaukee and Atlanta and everywhere else he's been. And Jay Crowder is this all caps, you know, and he's like, people stop tagging me. I looked up and down the replies to nobody tagged him. Oh,
wow. Okay.
But just like, you know, I never said anything like, you guys didn't want me, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody sent me the quote after I deleted my tweet. So I was like, oh, maybe I forgot. Maybe I was wrong about. He said they had a country club culture when they showed up, which, like, you were there for like 10 games, sat out of Phoenix after they got Anyway, no time for this, but a little bit about Bud.
It's all caps. I'm staring.
It's all he does. It's all he does is all caps. But I didn't misremember, even though I said I thought I might have. I was right. He did say that, and then he proceeded to stink as a Buck, and now he's out of the league. But what was I? Oh, but I think the time was there for Bud, though. I mean, it's so complicated because of like the way things happened the last couple of years, and I wouldn't say it's all on him, but I do think sometimes like a coach does stop resonating to a certain level. And you know, he had lost his brother right before that playoff run, and he probably should have stepped away to take some time with that, but didn't want to, of course, leave the team. And, you know, nothing about the team was sharp that playoffs. And when you have that kind of a playoff run where just the whole team looks disorganized, even outside of the Giannis stuff, it is just hard to keep going, I think, at a certain point. But looking back now, it's like, yeah, maybe you should have just toughed it out, you know, had that moment where the ownership or whatever is like, no, this is our guy, like, get with it or not. And look how much we've accomplished. And I would have loved to see Bud coach Dame too. I think that would have been very fun.
Well, so you said it, not me. The Giannis stuff.
I meant injury.
Sure you did, but there's other stuff that comes with Giannis that may make national headlines in the news. So here's the thing. It's not really a Knicks question anymore, but I guess just for Knicks fans listening, that there has been a quiet but starting to get louder movement of like, did we go all in too soon? That Giannis is going to be available in a year, and should we have gone all in then? Is that misguided? Do you think like this is way too early? Giannis isn't going anywhere. Like, where's your head at the moment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, ESPN's Bobby Marks yesterday, and I think they're going to yank him off TV for a while for saying this, but it was like, Giannis isn't asking for a trade, and they're not going to trade him, so we can put away the hypothetical Giannis trades. I think, Giannis just re-signed again a couple of years ago, or a year ago when they got Dame.
Yeah, a year ago. The Dame trade
before seeing it. Yeah. And I think realizes that, he certainly, and I'm not going to say he did the LeBron shadow GM stuff, certainly weighed in heavily in favor of Griffin, which obviously put them behind the 8 ball over the last year and a half or so. And I think that complicates the way Doc is perceived there too and everything else. But ultimately, I think Giannis more or less is kind of in a place where it's like, I wasn't against this stuff that's happened on the Bucks, and now we're here and let's figure it out, more so than I'm going to leave right now because things are tough in the first 2 weeks of the season. And I think they have a pretty good shot of figuring it out. Like, I don't think they're that far away from, you go 9-4 or whatever, which is good, but not a crazy run. And then you're 500 and then you can go from there. I think they would have to be pretty disappointing like all year long for this to really come up as a thing. And I can tell you, as a cautionary tale, I saw the Toronto Raptors wait on Giannis until all of their good players left for nothing. And now they're like just praying that the Knicks cast offs and Grady Dick can make them a good team again. What?
The Knicks cast-offs. Like that. Shout out RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly.
I have RJ in my fantasy basketball dynasty league, and he looks great
numbers.
Right now. He's putting up the numbers, man. Keep up the shooting, RJ. But you know what I mean, though. Like they kind of lost that era because I think more or less they just sat on their hands. Like, oh, imagine if we had Giannis with some of Pascal and OG and Fred for as long as he was there, and just they couldn't get anyone. And I think I would rather bite early than not bite at all. In terms of adding players, like I would rather go get Bridges, OG, and Towns, even though I'd said I don't like the Towns. I'd rather do that than be like, I think we can get Giannis or whoever else, right? Oh, I don't even know who else is that disappointing. I mean, you could say Luka. I don't think that's happening, right? But if you're like, maybe in 3 years, like maybe you're bad in 3 years. It's like these NFL teams that are like, oh, we just need the quarterback, and we've had a great defense for 3 years. Well, you probably don't anymore. You kind of need to go now in pro sports these days. And I think it's silly to say, oh, maybe we could have gotten Giannis in a year or two. And you just don't know how the whole league changes by then. And I mean, like, we all know it's OKC, right? Like, we all know what happens. It's going to be them or the Spurs, the teams with all the picks. Like, that's the funny thing about the Bucks. They get a golden parachute if they mess this whole thing up.
They do. Yeah. And that's to the friends that have just will not stop texting me about like, did we go all in too soon? Like, here's the thing, like they wouldn't have wanted Randall back. They would have wanted there would have been a reset involved. Like if Giannis is getting traded,
picks, right? I mean, I think they need players and picks. So I see these things of like, oh, this team could offer all their picks and Ben Simmons, the Nets thing. Like, doesn't mean anything. That doesn't matter. That doesn't help me if I'm the Bucks. Like, you're good now because you have Giannis, and history tells you you're probably a top 3 seed. So great, we have your picks, and
you wouldn't have the Nets picks though. You wouldn't have the Nets.
Well, they
picks,
have one of theirs, right?
Which is this year's, which they plan to use on. I mean, that would be talk about. If
they have Cooper Flag, maybe we can have the conversation.
I was about to say, if it's the one pick, then yeah, you can talk to him. But if I think like what they're trying to, the Nets did a good thing by offloading Bridges. Like objectively, they did a good thing by offloading Bridges and getting the package they got back, especially with them now having the opportunity to blow it up. As far as the Bucks are concerned, I'm with you that like we could be back here in a month and these teams but the Knicks are 17-10, the Bucks are 17. We'll just say it again. Both teams are 17-10, and it's like, oh, remember when we were struggling through the first 2 weeks of the season, and the conversation was just entirely too soon because that's the nature of the landscape now.
Trent's hit 50% of his threes since then. Khris came back and they're blitzing teams in his minutes. And
the Knicks
I don't think that's
is up to 15th when it was 25th like a month ago.
We'll be fighting you. The Bucks are aiming for 15th too. So good luck. That's our spot this season.
There you go. So I also do like I like the starting five that at least that the Knicks have put together. I like the collection of talent that they have. This matchup on Friday is interesting because they've been just murdering teams that played drop, and the Bucks famously have played a drop over at their peak, I should say, have played a drop, especially with Brook Lopez. Now this is where like Anunoby is Giannis in this sense, although it's actually like a fun conversation. Who's better as an off-ball wing, as like a free safety, Giannis or Anunoby at the 4? The Mikal Bridges fighting over screens is like hit or miss so far this year. There are nights where he's really good at it and it makes the drop less lethal because he's staying on people's hips. Then there's other games where he just runs into brick walls and guys have open shots. So as far as this matchup is concerned, who do you think, first of all, how do you think they'll guard Cat? Do you think they'll play a drop and that's they'll match up basically Brook in on the Cat assignment?
Probably 50-50 if they try to do that, or if they try to start to drop Brook off of Hart and then rely on screen navigation to stay close to Brunson or the wings or whoever else. But I mean, I would think if they don't start that way, they might get there pretty fast and then have Giannis on Cat to just be up and disrupt at the level of the screen. And he starting in the Cavs game, I want to say, like he had been playing more off ball, more passive, even when he was in the screen that game. And he needed to take more ownership defensively when he's out there too. I mean, they need him, I think, to do more defensively and a little less offensively at this version of this team. And he did that in the most recent game. But when he's up on the level of the screen, like he can obviously just destroy possessions. I think they need him to do that a little bit more. So again, huge if he plays. Obviously, if you're talking about like Bobby Portis instead, you're just in a much more fraught position. But they are still defaulting drop. They still want Brook around the rim whenever possible. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him quote unquote cover Hart and try to make the Knicks do those kind of funkier actions versus just letting Cat and Brunson pick and pop and leaving one of them open.
So who's guarding Brunson in this situation? And I guess
probably Trent. Trent if he's still starting.
Okay.
Trent. Yeah. I really hope they don't ask Prince to do it. So they are looking at him as like a second, premier defender, which I don't think is terrible, but it's just the kind of players. Like I think he's a very good defender of forwards. Like I think he should be busy this whole matchup with Bridges and Anunoby, but they keep trying to put him on guards and he's just too slow, man. I'm not knocking him as a player, but he's like, a 6'8", wide shouldered dude. He can't keep up with these little guys. Like Sam Merrill was putting him in a blender in these Cavs games. So I would hope that they stick to Trent and then some AJ Green or again, if we see Ryan Rollins, if they'll use Andre Jackson Jr. as the guy to like pick him up full court and just add the kind of miles to him over the course of a game, might pick up a bunch of fouls. That's actually like the thing to watch with Ajax is how much does he foul? He's been pretty clean the last couple of games. But they'll throw a lot of guards at him. I hope they don't use too much Prince, but they might use Prince some. But the Knicks have so many wings, though. He might be busy the whole game with Mikal and OG.
Yeah, the initial thought hearing this as a Knicks fan is that if Brook is on Hart in this situation, you bring Hart into the action, and if Brook drops, then that's Jalen Brunson in the mid range, which he could use a game where he's just seeing shots go down. Then you're relying on the screen navigation, right? The same way you said for the Knicks defense, and that's where is Trent going to navigate better? Thought he did a great job against Maxey, probably the fastest player in the league, and then was like having trouble keeping up with like Levine and guys like that. Said Schroeder, and it's like, okay, I mean, you got to bring it every game. If you're going to be the premier defensive guy, you can't just take these nights off. The players are too good in the league. So you'd think you'd be up for playing the Knicks anyway, but it's more than just that. It's really hard to do. The Knicks are very talented. Brunson's great. But yeah, I would imagine that they'll try to do that first, just because when Brook isn't in the paint, they just tend to struggle containing, everything except the primary action. So that's where, look, if there's a regression to the meme shooting wise from the Bucks, then Jesus, another game where this would be now 3 straight games where a team came in, like the Rockets. Oh, we haven't been shooting well all season. Fred VanVleet shooting 27% from the field, goes out, gets like close to 30 points, hits a ton of threes. And the Rockets didn't shoot well from 3 that game, I should say, but they were, still effective. And then the Hawks yesterday, the Knicks shot close to 50% from 3 for most of this game. They shot 22 of 47 for the game and still lost because the Zachary Ricochet, you talk about talk about a Klay Thompson light for a night, 7 threes in the game. So I fully expect the Bucks to have a full regression to the mean game. And, Bobby Portis hits 3 threes. Brook hits 4 threes. Giannis plays and hits his first couple threes of the season. Like, I fully expect all of this, although I think he's going to play that math game. And it's like, if they beat us from 3, they haven't beaten anybody from 3 yet this year. So, that's what I'm expecting.
It's going to be interesting, like what the Bucks rotation looks like. How much does an AJ Green play, or do those guys snap out of it? But I think, both the Bucks and Knicks have gone through this of like, sometimes you dare a team to shoot and they take you up on it and it really works out poorly. And sometimes it doesn't. But I do think it could be dangerous for the Knicks, though, if they do lean into that and just, if Trent feels good, I think he could put a game out of reach quickly. Because if he's playing like the 17 point per game player, even without Middleton, it's just too hard to worry about a guy like that and Giannis and Dame. They saw that last year when the 7 games under Doc they played with Khris. They were awesome. Like, they went into OKC and bullied OKC. I think it's just really hard to keep up with them when they have that third guy who's anywhere close to the level of the first 2 guys. So that's what I would worry about from the Knicks perspective. Also, like, I think, Dame in the drop with Cat, like, he's just gonna, as good as the perimeter defenders are, he's going to find joy. He had the one stinker against the Grizz because they're just long and athletic and his shot was off that game. I think he's going to be a lot to handle for New York. And that's, again, where it comes into like, how much can you send the help off the shooters and can the Bucks make anything? Like, it's just, we hate to sound like we're just talking about the same couple of things, but it turns out shooting in basketball in 2024 is pretty important at the end of the day.
In the world of what we're all trending toward, the Celtics averaging 52 threes a game is insane. Just like
nasty.
With that being the way that this is trending, where the Bucks are averaging 36 attempts a game, and that's low, is, shooting's going to just be significantly, which is like where the deuce for Josh Hart thing comes from. That's like, Josh Hart isn't a shooter, is almost a reluctant shooter too, which can be detrimental. I think he's been fine and does a lot of other things that unlocks the Knicks offense this season, but it's why I don't dismiss the calls for Deuce McBride.
Also, Deuce McBride is just like probably the early most improved player. I mean, I know he hasn't been that all year, but that game against Boston, oh my God.
Yeah, the 6th man convo is where I want him to end up, because then the movement for him to start was like, yeah, but then he's not the 6th man anymore. You're trying to take an award away from the guy. How dare you try to take that away from Deuce McBride?
Bobby's been waiting, man. He's been the 8th man of the year a couple of years in a row. He's hoping to put that one on the mantle at some point.
I guess that'll be what we fight out about this year. That we'll see.
I hope you're fighting with someone else after February on that one. To be honest with you, the way he's playing on both ends this season, but we'll see.
Yeah. Last couple. What's the latest on Khris? Like Khris Middleton. What do we know? What do you know?
They're saying no setbacks. He's just not quite fully ready. So he's doing like 3-on-3s, but not the full 5-on-5s yet. They're just very cautious with him. I think 2 years ago, they brought him back early, the last true year. And then he had kind of a setback because it felt like they brought him back a little too early. And then he was out much longer. So I think like last season, they're going to be very, very cautious, probably start to ramp up his minutes when he does play. So he won't come in and play like 30 games. But I don't think it's going to be that much longer, which is like famous last words now for Bucks people and Khris Middleton. But it feels like, we're seeing him. He's working out like everything. He's able to move on it. They just want to make extra sure, I suppose, or he needs to feel a little bit better before they fully clear him. I think it really realistically could be like he could be a week away at almost any point. We're just not going to know until, he wakes up, feels great one day, does a workout, feels great and says, yeah, I think I'm ready now.
And then MarJon Beauchamp. So, again, I say this as a Knicks fan that hears a lot from Knicks fans that we need more players.
You want him?
I don't know what to expect.
They're looking for someone to take him. Well, no one does. That's the whole thing.
So the question you asked me, do I want him? I'm going to ask you, do I want him?
What? Well, how? I don't think you guys could get him right with the
So
second apron space.
the aprons of it all is like, so the Knicks aren't going to hard cap themselves for Beauchamp, you know?
No, and the Bucks, they're at second apron now too, so they can't take back a dollar more or combined salary. So I don't think he's going to be a Knick. I hope he goes somewhere where he can play. He showed flat. He shot 40% last year on relatively low volume. He will have possessions where you're like, oh, this guy could be where Nickeil Alexander-Walker is right now. Like he could be like one of your top wings off the bench at least. But then like he'll have a possession where like his confidence gets a little shaky and he'll turn down an open three and dribble into a bad two or things like that. It's just like no coach wants to play a guy, especially on a team like the Bucks, who you just can't rely on possession to possession. So like I think he is more offensively gifted than like an Andre Jackson Jr., but it just has these lapses. I think he just needs to go play somewhere. So I am hoping that they trade him. They open up a roster spot and do whatever they want with it. I would love if he went to like the Spurs. Now, if they have a couple of injuries and he could just get some run there, like Sandro Mamukelashvili has, who I think is hopefully an NBA player, but has gotten to play there and had some fun moments. But I'd be pretty surprised if it was like a team like the Knicks. Like I think the teams who wanted to get him would know like, this guy's not there yet, but they're still like 6'7", should have a shot, like should be able to defend, like has had some good flashes on the perimeter defending, just like has not been able to put it all together. And I think him being vaulted by other young Bucks players was kind of the end of the road of like, okay, the minutes are just never going to be here now.
Yeah, this feels like a Bones Highland situation where he goes from one contender to a team willing to take a chance on him to, we'll see what eventually happens with Highland's career. So Knicks fans, I asked, okay, I did ask the question.
I mean, yeah, given that you said no wings earlier, I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. Maybe if he like, I don't know if someone would buy him out, maybe you could bring him in then, but
that's really the only path I see is if he's a free agent on the buyout market and the Knicks can take a flyer on him. But I think the Knicks plan is Matt Ryan and Landry Shamet to get healthy, and then Precious Achiuwa to get healthy. And then there you go.
Yeah, those guys, I mean, they have one skill that you for sure know about that is always going to be helpful. So I get if that's where they're going.
At this point, if they can play, I will. They'd be a skill, Like I need
going
15 minutes at this point. Like I need you to be playable for 15 minutes combined, so that way OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson and Cat aren't playing 40 minutes in November.
I was surprised they did
at the moment.
I was surprised they did the Cam Payne thing, man. I've been a proponent for Reggie Bullock. Like I just get a wing shaped player in there because obviously you have Brunson, you've got Deuce, and I like Kolek. Like I think he's an NBA player too. I think the order of those can be difficult, and you don't know how good he's going to be year one or whatever. But I'm continually surprised after half a year of the Cam Payne experience that teams keep opting into the Cam Payne experience.
So Cam Payne, when signed, was the 10th man, and there was reporting that he's actually the 11th man. Then they lost Mitch. Then they lost. Then they made the trade 2-for-1 for Cat, and then they lost Shamet, and now Cam Payne is your 7th man. Like that's
and Precious, right?
And Precious, but like Precious didn't. I think Precious and Payne were playing together in preseason. So he was initially brought on, and this is where again liked the version of the team post Mikal trade, pre-Cat trade. Because it was like last year, everybody went down after the Anunoby for RJ and Quickly trade. Yeah. And we were playing nights with 7 guys because Tibbs, like his thing is I play who I trust, not like I'm going to play 9 no matter what. Yeah. And I was like, all right. So then these end of the bench guys, the like Obi's little brother and Dwayne Washington and all these other guys, if they're not playable, just fill out the roster with like Cam Payne and Markieff Morris and TJ, like go get some vets that he'll play. So that way, if like that scenario comes up again,
you've got a guy that he'll put in the game.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And you know what happened instead is they've lost 6 guys from that calculation since that Mikal Bridges trade. Now Karl-Anthony Towns helps. Don't get me wrong, it, especially when he's on a heater. But now they're just a little thin, and. Part of their back end is now 3 rookies, 2 of which I'm somewhat high on, but we'll see. I I would very much like the Knicks to just go on like a little winning streak. I think a lot of the vibes here in New York too, post World Series, post football. I'm gonna call both of those seasons over too. I think going into the winter sports, we could really use some good vibes here in New York, which hopefully we're getting from the New York Knicks soon.
Have I ever laughed with you about my favorite Bill Simmons football take ever?
No, what?
Going into like 2 playoffs ago when he called Daniel Jones the thinking man's Josh Allen.
That's amazing.
That's why he's the GOAT, dude. Like,
he's so good at this. Oh my gosh, Bill Simmons. I'll never forget.
The Giants might win it all.
Yeah. He had a take this year during, like, it was a political take. Like, obviously, like, we all know what happened this week, but like after Biden dropped out, he compared Kabbalah to like a backup quarterback finally getting their shot that everybody wanted the whole time. I was like, this is why you're a 1 of 1. You just compared her to Brady, basically. Like, hey, the fan base was clamoring for the backup this whole time.
Some of his early Mac Jones takes, like, there's no fear. That's when you've reached nirvana as a podcaster, when you're just like, this could be the worst thing anyone's ever said. I also heard a clip of Skip who said, like, I just trust Cooper Rush more than Dak, which there's just no reason to ever believe that.
Ever.
We gotta get more fearless, I think. I don't know.
Indeed. Well, listen, I'm not the one fighting with Jay Crowder. I think you've got the fearless part down. Okay.
I did not opt into that, and I did opt out of that.
That fight was brought to your doorstep, and you immediately closed the door.
It was a Friday afternoon. I had to go like take care of leaves in the yard. No, I'm just gonna put the phone. I don't need to bicker with Jay Crowder.
Always a good option. Ty, as always, it is good to talk to you. I didn't bring up, I brought up off the air, but I didn't bring up what happened between our 2 baseball teams in the playoffs. And as a result, I'm also not going to bring up the fact that you have the full freedom to laugh at the quarterback trade that was made by our football teams, which has gone so great for mine.
Packers. A couple more. If you got Bakhtiari in there, you'd really be ready to go.
I can't wait for 2 decades from now when Jordan Love at 40 years old or whatever gets traded to the Jets, and whoever steps in for him suddenly looks like one of the best quarterbacks.
And also, like, a week after the trade, Love announces he's just decided to join the Church of Scientology too.
Yeah,
like something like that.
He's also a weirdo.
He's also super weird, but nobody knew. The Packers and Steelers, man, just like actively hiding the truth as long as possible. They're like, enjoy Antonio Brown, buddy. He's really so good.
And Le'Veon for that matter. Ty, before you get out of here, where can people find the Eurostep Podcast Network?
Wherever you find this terrific Knicks Film School coverage on YouTube or on your podcast platform of choice, if you search up Eurostep Podcast Network, or you can find me on Twitter. And I'm trying out Blue Sky. We'll see, at Ti Windisch, TIWINDISCH.
Yeah, I've gotten the invitation. I've seen the movement after, things happened this week that people might want to migrate to a different social media account. I think I'm Twitter or nothing is my future, but nothing might not be bad. Like nothing might not be a bad choice. Like you said, you rake some leaves. You know,
that's really never a bad choice.
There you go.
You can always go outside. Yeah.
See, you. This is where the different culture.
Yeah, this is Midwest privilege.
I'm looking at the concrete jungle over here, man.
We got grass and trees. That is.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm like stone's throw from Long Island, so that's not like that different, but. I have no lawn to rake at the moment. So.
Just like buy some leaves, just like move them around back and forth.
Go to my parents' house, get a bag of leaves, go to the parking lot, and then I'm just going to rake just because Ty told me to.
2024 version of like the Zen garden with a little sand rake. You're just out in the lawn moving them.
Exactly. Ty, as always, it is good to see you. Thank you for joining me for this episode. And thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug the show, head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. The Knicks take on the Milwaukee Bucks on Friday night. We will be at T-Squared Social for another watch party. So come on down. As we've mentioned, we are giving away 2 tickets to Knicks Bulls next Wednesday. at this watch party. So you're going to want to be there so you have your chance to win. All you have to do is follow Knicks Film School and Juan Please on Instagram. The links are in the bio for you to sign up. You could come without signing up, but we would like to get a head count, so please RSVP. So please join us on Friday for our next watch party at T Squared Social. Should be a fun time, win or lose. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll speak with you soon.